Welcome, Portland Urban Beekeepers.
Welcome.
I'm your
You're not
president,
gonna
Brad Wagstaff. I will go rapidly through the intro slides because of our very important guest this evening. We have a lot of people online as well, so. And our guest is Dr. Dewey Karen for honey extraction shows, tasting and judging. You know about the Swarm List, the Bee Buddy program, Bee Days, the library and equipment rental. Our Swarm List has been very active. I'll skip the probably 200 swarms last month. It's crazy. And figure $200 a pop. That's a lot of activity, a lot of emails and texts. Very important OSBA summer picnic in Tillamook this year. And Laura and I, and maybe Brian, are at least going. It's a really nice apiary. It's worth going. Dewey, are you going?
I'm going, yes.
Dewey will be there. It's just a beautiful place.
So what's the date?
It,
Is it the same as last?
Sad season.
July.
yeah, sorry, why is not even on here?
26.
26th, 11 to 1. It'll be on the emails. In July, what have we been doing? June and July with Blanchet House, there's a lot going on. They're selling our honey at the market with a lot of their other stuff, which I think is really cool. Or they'll have jarred honey for July. And you can buy it for a very high ounce price here to support Blanchet House. They're also building a food forest, putting in permaculture, and all this is right next to the apiary. Super cool. Katie and I were out there every 2 weeks doing 7 hives now, 7 full hives. Amazing. This painting here was done by one of the residents. It is amazing. You have to look at the close detail, but very cool. And they're doing wax, honey and lemon wax, and other products from the hive.
Is it wax or soap?
Soap,
Soap made with the wax.
soap wax, yeah. Upcoming events,
Yes.
yeah,
Anybody want
Eh.
to volunteer?
yeah. Come out and help, and it'll be the best hour you spend in Carlton. July, we got the learning apiary, 2 days in July. Gather and Blather has been great. It's, meet a whole bunch of other beekeepers that you don't see here.
Next with the picnic, maybe you should move it to
Oh.
a different weekend.
We will move it. Right. Next month, we have Diane Dickerson on residential beekeeping. Best practices. And then August 16th, we've got a honey extraction workshop with Brian, and Gather and Blather in August. And the learning apiary, you know where it is. So without further ado, Dewey Karen is here. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thank you, thank you. I'll expand a little bit, not quite what we said I'd do, but some of it at least.
All right, and where is your presentation?
We're just finding it on the, it was on the laptop.
There you go.
You get rid of that. Let me see.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Laptop, there we go. All righty. For those online, I'll be glad to try to answer questions, so just type them in or raise a hand.
All right, let me get this shared. Why is it not shared?
If you stand there, you don't have to.
Yeah,
Okay, gonna talk a bit of the different aspects in terms of all related around honey. There's honey difference, how is it made, etc. For background, you know, I came here in 2009 after retiring on the East Coast, 20 or 40 some years teaching, which included beekeeping and entomology. I am also now with Oregon State with the Master Beekeeper program on content and communication specialist with the Oregon Master Beekeeper program. So I work in a number of different areas across the state in an ARM program. Alrighty, not this work there, or,
You can just tell me to,
okay, maybe.
There you go.
Okay, so start with a couple of issues. The one, of course, on the article that was in Willamette Week in terms of should beekeeping be banned in Portland. A resource that you might not yet be aware of is this one from Oregon State. Nandoni and Ramesh developed this after I encouraged them to do so. And what this is like 9 talking points. And basically what we're trying to indicate is that for the urban environment, honeybees and native bees, wild bees, the existing bee flora, fauna, I'm sorry, is not at that risk. Where we have risky populations of native bees are in very unusual habitats, mountaintops, south sides of mountains, different types of soil conditions, etc. The urban environment has plenty of resources for the native bees that are there, and there's a lot of different native bees in the urban environment. And when we bring in colonies of honeybees in backyards, there still are plenty of resources. The native bees and honeybees would mainly compete in the spring, and yet there are lots of pollen resources that go unharvested in the spring. So there's plenty for both types of populations. Our honeybees now collecting all this nectar this year, particularly, is not an issue with native bees because they don't collect nectar. They need only a little bit of nectar from plants to moisten the pollen ball that they make that their young live on. So none of them are storing honey. Now, the exception, of course, are bumblebees, but the bumblebees of interest, in other words, with threatened populations or not very robust populations, are in very unusual habitats across the state. So this program of Andoni has been collecting this information with the other program, not the Master Beekeeper, but the Master Melitologist program. So they have some very good resources. So this is a good talking, sort of 9 talking. So this would complement what Diane's going to talk to you over the next time. Okay, next one. Is this next one? Do it.
Do we?
Yeah.
Is that across the country, pretty much what they're talking about in this protocol?
It would be across the country, yes.
Okay.
They are using some examples, of course, from Portland, but yes, it would apply to others, communities that might be facing some of the same. And our residential beekeeping is a guideline to basically best practices beekeeping. And that speaks to if you're keeping bees in an urban area, that would be, again, applicable to. So it's kind of those two would go together.
One thing though, Oregon has a better sense of their native bee population than any other state in the country.
Than any other state, and they're starting to export it. So the states around now started the same type of programs, but we're ahead because of pandemic. And if you look on the Bee Atlas program, which is what has developed this program, you'll see that there is an awful lot of interactions, and that bees, native bees, and honeybees go some of the same flowers. But there are others. And so when you have a very heavy honeybee population, let's say in your backyard, then the native bees are still there. They just might not be on some of the more common plants that the honeybees are. Or they're there very early in the morning. Or in some plants, they will come back with some nectar secretion on the top things, but later in the day. And so the native, so there is not that direct one-on-one competition. So these are some.
Yeah, I just was wondering that for the state fair, the OSBA has a sign machine. I wonder if something like this would be helpful to have there to hand out. It seems to be kind of a question.
That's a great question.
He,
Great
he's working on additional hand out stuff,
Yeah, I
one
think-
sheets.
Because
One
people come by and ask those kind of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said that, I was thinking we need that one sheet.
They're-
They
That's what
are.
he
Yeah.
said at
Okay.
the Portland Metro meeting.
He said it down. Okay. All right. Then the other, of course, is, boy, that blue isn't showing up at all. The start of the season showed that bees were really, had very heavy death rate. Next one, please. And there was a survey that was done initially by different agencies. And it revealed that a very heavy die-off of colonies, raising alarm of pollination in agriculture. So they surveyed, next please, and as a result of the survey, they found that about 1.6 million commercial bee colonies were lost, which represents 62% of what we think is the commercial population of beekeepers. 702 beekeepers participated in the study. They owned about 68% of the colonies in the United States. So very robust. I mean, no surveys never get to have this type of numbers. Estimated 220, almost $225 million just in colony loss alone. Well, you've heard that at the time of this, USDA took some surveys of the colonies of 6 beekeepers, colonies that were not growing in the almonds, that were still dying, still decreasing, and from the same beekeepers, colonies that appeared to be healthy. And so then they went back to the lab and are looking at those, and we've had first publications. First publication indicates that bee viruses, the form wing virus and the Borrelia viruses, were in both populations in equal numbers, but in very high numbers. They found mites in the colonies. They tested the mites for the resistance of the mites, the efficacy of the mites, basically, to the commercial synthetic Amitraz, what we might know of as Apipar. The beekeepers would use Amitraz in a different form. They won't buy the strips that we can buy, because it's toppings. And they found a high degree of resistance in that population. Coupled with the fact that they're using acids in their colonies makes that synthetic not work as well. So the tried and true method they had been using to control mites was a failure this past year, which could explain why, in part, they had such heavy losses from the viruses. They also took samples for pesticides, and they found pesticides in all of the samples. The bee applied pesticides, the beekeeper applied pesticides, but also pesticides from growers in the crops that they visit. So it was sort of a question of the 6 beekeepers that had some of the very heaviest losses. If you look for it, you found it as a potential issue. Now, next, our overall loss for the clubs was very different. You see, pub, I had 40 responses. Overall loss was 25%, and in the state for 251 individuals, with just about the same, 25.5%, 26%. This was a loss. And then next, the levels of losses, I've shown you this before. The next has been going down. Okay, so that red dot is the trend line for the last dozen years. This is just pub, just the pub losses. It's also the trend line for backyard beekeepers. So you can see we do a companion survey of the commercials, and our commercials this year had a 54% loss. We didn't have very many. We only had 7 individuals finish a survey. But the people that did the original survey, Pam, had 17 individuals, over 50,000 of roughly the 80,000 bee colonies we think are in the state. They're not here year round. They go to California, they go to roads, but with owners that are state people. And that loss was 59%. So 25% here, 25.5 state by 4 individuals with 1 to 49 colonies. So it's a very different picture of which type of beekeeper that you looked at. Yeah.
Is there any discerning between, on the commercial numbers? Is there any discerning between the bees that are shipped long distances that have died versus a localized commercial beekeeper that doesn't ship?
So
Yeah,
the 6 that they pulled the samples from were all people that come from the Midwest, from Texas on up into the coast. They didn't get any that were further on the East Coast.
And those samples were taken in California or?
So they were taken in February in California, as the bees were coming into the state. They looked at bees that went into winter houses, bees that had been wintered outdoors, bees that were northern bees that had been taken to Texas in the fall, then came to California from Texas. So that was kind of the variations they looked at. I mean, that's not the whole picture of what it is, but looking at 68% of what we think of the counties, that's a pretty robust. I'm sorry, the survey did. They only looked at 60.
Yeah, because what's the difference on like maybe they'd be smaller commercial beekeepers if they stay localized to the.
So they had a very small number of backyard beekeepers, hobbyists, and that in between beekeeping. Okay, 50 to 500 colonies. They didn't have many in there, 702 samples. What they did, those numbers were intermediate. So the commercials were the highest number, 62% nationally, and then like 59% nationally, and 54% nationally for the backyarders. So there was a bit of a difference, but they were still all over 50%. And it was mostly commercials that they.
And do the commercial keepers have it built into their pricing, if you will, their cost versus effort, as far as, it's cheaper in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to start a new one than it is to save one.
No, the pricing is grower pricing, and in several crops, not all of them, in several crops, almonds and blueberries particularly, they pay by how strong the colony is.
Mm.
So if you might be able to have 2 weak colonies, commercially what they would do is likely combine those two. And so they would call that a loss of 1 right there. Okay. So they're not out counting colonies, how they figure loss. They have a contract for 5,000 colonies, and they put everything together, and they can only come up with 2,000 colonies. That to them says, I lost 3,000 colonies, and that's what they would report on the survey. You and I would go out in the backyard and open lids, and this is a dead and this is a living. We would count different. So that's sort of the way they come up with numbers.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What they will then have to do is take the strong colonies and make up their losses, which some of them are doing. This is the second year. There are some that are trying to sell what is left of their operation that's in really a state of flux right now. All right, let's go to the topic, honey. As we know, one of the world's oldest, earliest sweeteners. It's mentioned in all the major books earlier. Initially, people destruct harvested, that is, they destroyed the comb to get at the product of honey and used, of course, the beeswax as a product. Eventually, we learned to keep them in gums or skeps. This is from a Revolutionary War farmer. And in that way, we drove the bees away rather than killing the bees in most cases. And then we would then expect to, let's say with 4 colonies, he would harvest 2 of them. Sometimes the strongest colonies, because it would be a better harvest. And so he'd have an empty gum and he'd have an empty skep. So then he'd set those out in the spring and expect a swarm to come in. Or if he had very strong bees in the spring, he would be able to do some dividing. Okay. So swarming was very much a part of your management. That's how I do Africanized bees. If we didn't have swarms, I would not have more colonies of bees. We're down to 8 right now during the winter down there, but we harvested from about 32 colonies this year. Because the bees abscond, because they leave, we just put out the boxes come spring. Spring there will be in October. We have an early flow from eucalyptus, and we'll just put the boxes out, and the bees will come in and have it out. And then we just keep dividing them to get up to our 40 or so colonies to be able to. So this is the way it's done. They're not good honey producers, they're good brood producers. So we're getting what would average about 25 pounds per colony.
So not bad, but not much.
No, yeah, and we're harvesting everything.
Oh,
Harvesting
well.
everything. And much of our honey, for that reason, comes out to be, not fully ripe. Which is fine, because people are using it as a medicine, and you don't want 15% honey. If you're gonna put it in your ears, you're gonna put it in your eyes, you can swallow. And 19-20% medicine goes down, it's like, almost like water. But it still has that sweetener. So they don't like the very heavily, dehydrated honey that we like here. Yeah. So lots of definitions of honey. Probably doesn't surprise you, we don't have a legal definition. There is legislation now before the US House of Representatives and the US Senate on the integrity of honey bill. Probably will go nowhere. There's efforts on organic standards that have been churning along for like 4 or 5 years. That's going nowhere. So, you know, make up your own definition in terms of honey. Next, we don't know where the word comes from. Middle East. So what is it? It's a sugary plant secretion secreted by insects into simple sugars with lowest moisture content, converted by insects, I'm sorry. It might not be directly as we think of nectar, it might be some other products as well. So what the bees do is they collect some sort of a sugar. They chemically then convert the sugars that are there into the simple sugars of glucose and fructose. It depends on the honey source, which one will then predominate in the final. And then they physically make it into that thick consistency by water evaporation. So that is, it's a simple equation. You take sucrose with water that they have in their system. By the action of an enzyme, it converts to the two simple sugars. And in addition, there may be other sugars in addition to sucrose, but virtually every nectar has sucrose.
So why is the glucose and the sucrose the same formula?
Because of one is worked primarily by one enzyme, invertase, and the other by the enzyme sucrose.
So it's not really chemicals, it's not.
So enzymes enter into chemical, but are not part of it. It's the way they take the molecular C12 structure and make it into the C6. So nectar to honey, flower to hive. Next, of course, all the action then in the hive. The bees that collect it, as we know, the foragers do not do the processing. They come back. They then, with antennal contact and making a droplet available in their mouth parts, it's below their proboscis. They then are asking a hive bee, a recipient bee, to extend its proboscis and sip from this nectar that they have. And so this might involve one bee or several bees, usually several, and they will do this with dancing. Transfer is 20 to 30 seconds, but there are a lot of 1 to 2 second transfers that occurs in the dancing. So when the bee is dancing, it is solicited by a donor bee, by a recipient bee, and it stops, but not completely stops. It sort of offers the nectar that the bee puts its mouth part in and takes it away, and it's gone. Then it goes, was it one that we just was in there? No, okay. So what are the other sources? Beekeepers commercial feed the high fructose corn syrup. Some plants, such as blueberry cotton, actually don't secrete their nectar from a flower. They can secrete it from a leaf surface, what we call extrafloral nectaries. Honeydew honey is what we call forest honey in the rest of the world. Stingless bees also produce honey, as do bumblebees. There is an ant that does. They store they store it in a body of an ant. So some ants hang from the top of their nest, and they're the reservoirs for their liquid. Okay, they don't make some structure. There is a wasp that stores it in paper. You'd think it would ruin the paper pretty quickly, but somehow it puts down the saliva like a cellophane cover, and then puts honey in it so it sits. And of course, there's what is called honey in the market that is almost anything and everything. There are a lot of syrups that are a lot cheaper, including corn, but rice primarily. Honeydew is the one that we call forest honey, and here's a honeybee on a leaf surface. And these wet droplets are this excretion from the plant sucking insects, the aphids, plant sucking insects. And this is very much prized in some places. It's a more full bodied honey. But you know, much of the honey we get out of Turkey and Greece, et cetera, is this forest honey. It's honeydew honey. So the definition of honey is often not just from nectar, but also from insects that get into the plant system, that suck it from the plant and then excrete it. Okay, so when we start making a definition of honey, you have to include that as one of the sources, not directly just nectar.
On the East Coast, they're having problems with spotted lanternfly.
Spotted lanternfly, which is
And
a
honey.
very large plant sucking critter. And the honey is a very good honey. It's a little bit darker, a little bit more full body taste, but yeah, lanternfly. And of course, then we get some unusual one, doesn't show up very well, but here's the green honey that we had down here along the interstate. It's probably from all power exhausts and things like that. It's showing up.
Polyethylene glycol.
Probably, yeah. So the water evaporation part is both an active and passive. Active is the receiving bee takes that nectar and goes to a place in the hive where there's less traffic and then blows bubbles basically with that nectar. And it's exposing a surface, and she's also mixing enzymes in there and other plants and other secretions. And what she's doing is she's starting the evaporation of the excess moisture. And then through passive evaporation, they actually start hanging droplets around the hive. And so on these nights where the temperature goes down, the difference of daytime, nighttime temperature, just great for this dehydration of the honey. When it finally reaches a point that is roughly below 18%, the honeybees put a wax covering over the cell. After that, there's no further evaporation, but these unopened cells here, these opening cells here, this is still continuing to decrease in moisture. Bees are the same age as the receiving bees, the ones that are ripening honey, are also the ones that produce these wax coverings. So what we call middle-aged bees, that's their job. Food processing, home building. So there's a whole group of cadre of bees. This group is often not present early in the spring, as we're short on nurses. Once we get enough nurses, then they graduate to this. There isn't much to do. So that's why we get props from things like big leaf maple, because there's not much work to do inside the home, but there's something outside for them to go to. So they become precocious foragers. The bees just go faster through their lifespan. And this is their running through their lifespan is all related to a series of physiological changes in some hormones. Okay, and as we know, they'll store in the middle. So then this is fully ripe honey. We say we should be taking honey that's not at least 80% cap. And you can see here, this is not yet capped. But sometimes this time of year, waiting for them to cap is a while. So you can just simply with the recommendation, just turn this on the side. If it drips honey, it means it still needs some more evaporation. But if you turn this on the side, although the cells are not yet capped, you may find that it is pretty much evaporating. So you can go ahead and harvest that, not wait for every last single cell. This would be the frame that you entered in the fair. Why? What is honey different? Well, the similar sugars by all organisms do not require further digestion. Because of the evaporation of moisture, there's a high viscosity to the product. That also then some of the glucose, and this is why some honeys you have more fructose as well. Some of the glucose that's produced is then has a relative to another enzyme. And so the enzyme, the glucose oxidase, converts some glucose into gluconic acid and water, and that's a protective one of the protective systems. Hydrogen peroxide, gluconic acid, and hydrogen peroxide, not water. I'm sorry, thank you. And those two are part of the reason why honey will basically last forever and ever. Now, what happens in this processing is the other things that are in nectar, and this is what makes honey so unique, are not lost. In fact, they are concentrated because, you have a lot less water. So the polyphenols, for example, the flavonoids, those are the things that make honey so useful in human diet. Those are the things that are the cancer fighting agents that are in honey. Things in the digestive tract, cancer, colon cancer, for example, is treated regularly with honey. The wounds are treated now mainstream doctors with honey dressing, home dressing. And the again, it's these polyphenols and these flavonoids that are in the nectar that are helping promote not only the more rapid healing, but with honey as a wound dressing, the honey, because of its nature, is actually cleaning out the cells that are dying, the dead cells. And so you get a faster wound healing because those dead cells are then disappearing due to the action of honey. Of course, it keeps it moist, and it's a good barrier to keep out microorganisms. Now, the reason we use Manuka honey for that is that we can go ahead and nuke Manuka honey with the radiation, and that doesn't then destroy the flavonoids and the polyphenols, et cetera, that are in the nectar. And an ingredient we call MgO that's in there as well. If you take your honey, the way you would sterilize it would be heat it. And so by heating it, we're going to change those proteins. Now, why we're doing that is that about 6% of honey has botulism spores in it. And so if you just slap honey on there, there's a chance you can introduce botulism into your system. But I want to point out that just because we can detect botulism in honey doesn't mean it's going to be infectious, right? So we don't want to feed babies honey that are very young because their system does not clear well. And so the botulism in the honey can go in there and get in one of these side channels, or get stuck somewhere, and then the botulism can grow because then the honey is diluted in the system. While the botulism is in honey or other microorganisms, because of this high viscosity, because of the hydrogen peroxide and gluconic acid, they do not replicate. Okay, so when you dilute it or you start destroying these components by heating honey, then you start getting the possibility of microorganisms and reignition. Okay, so honey is more than a simple sugar. Yeah.
Are some honeys more acidic than others?
So there's not a huge difference in the acidity. Gluconic acid is one of those components of that. It will vary from roughly 3.5 roughly into the low 5s. So there isn't much of a difference, not a big range. But the short answer is yes, some are more acidic. And it has to do with this glucose-fructose ratio that is coming out. If there's more glucose, you get more of the acid being produced by the oxidase and gluconic acid.
Because I have some honey from 2021 and it is just so acidic. It just has a different taste to it.
Has a different, a flatter taste to it. Yes. Honeys that have that flatter taste often are more acidic. But because honey is so sweet, we're really not aware that it's very acidic. I mean, 3.5 is very acidic.
Yeah.
And that'll take rust off.
That's Coca-Cola.
It's Coca-Cola. Yeah. So seasonality, we all know, of course, the whole season starts with after the winter solstice, the change in daylight, the queen starts laying some eggs. As long as there's a population that will grow, as long as then some pollen comes in, we then get the replacement of our older bees and then get a nurse bee population. Then things go very rapidly through the buildup. We try to get bees to expand in 2 boxes, most of us, you can manage them in 1. Then we need to be careful with colony division, which is the swarming process. We may make splits to help take care of that, make up splits for our losses, etc. It's all being able to determine which colonies are doing that division. Then at that point, we're going to add, as we approach the last part of our spring, we're going to add extra boxes because we don't want bees storing the honey in where the queen can lay eggs. That's going to hold the population back, and it's also going to promote more swarming because the chemicals of the queen will not get distributed. So swarming, supering is really the process of putting those extra boxes on to relieve the congestion to make up for the space that they need, okay? Then towards our summer season, late spring, summer, is when they're going to store a lot of that honey. We're going to make an evaluation in the fall, of course, and then the bees hopefully will hunker down, we'll take any supers off, or if we don't have a space to keep them, we'll leave them on. So that's sort of our roughly our season. So here's our early colonies that we start, an 8-frame, 10-frame colony. We try to with nukes and packages, start them in one box, but within 4 or 5 weeks, they need the second box. We're going to try to get them to use most of the frames here, not let honey get in the way from early crops early sources such as big leaf maple. Next. Then we need to add early supering is actually a method of hooking into the hoarding behavior of bees. So that if you don't put a super on in the colony, then they're going to still be in the area where they're rearing their babies and not kick into this hoarding behavior, which is if there's nectar available, they will go ahead and store it. Often we use this first super with a queen excluder. So that to hook into another resource on this next, please. I've been doing a bunch of Beekeeping Today podcasts on shorts, which are less than 15 minutes. And I've done a couple on this aspect of supering, hoarding behavior, etc. So Beekeeping Today, if you want to get in there and you can see they have a promo for the shorts. So how should we super here at the university? We've got 2 supers versus 1 super, all right? All things being equal, this colony will store more food. That's assuming that it doesn't become limiting with just a 1. So we really have keyed into this hoarding behavior. So we're really communicating to the bees that to store more restores excess surplus. Of course, when we learn, what we are doing is we're looking for signs and signals from the bees. We're letting the bees manage us by telling us they need this room. And we'll put a super on. By doing 2 supers at one time, we're telling the bees what we're managing our bees. That's assuming that you want all this extra honey. Next. If you're going to get that, you don't need to leave supers in storage. The bees aren't going to store in those boxes that are in storage. Don't leave them in storage. Next. This is my normal year in Vermont, what my bees look like in Vermont every year. It gets to be an issue after a while. By now I'm under supering. I'm trying to find those colonies that are my superstars in the apiary, and so I'm trying to consolidate. Okay, this colony isn't doing very well. It's only 3 supers.
So how do you get to the top soup?
Step ladder.
Step ladders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where in Vermont?
this is in Michigan. This is my first, yeah, outside of Lansing.
Wow,
Central.
I can't keep doing anymore.
Yeah, no, can't keep putting them on it. And my Aphrodite bees, of course, I can't do that because once they get a little bit of stores, they want to quit. I have to keep taking honey out of it.
Oh, that's why you harvest every week.
That's what we harvest every week, yeah. So removing supers, a number of different ways, bounce and brush, take the frames out individually. These are gonna be heavy to lift. Instead of lifting the supers off the box, then remove frames, bounce and brush, bounce on the top bar, that's the strongest part, not the rest of the frame. Okay, and then brush the remaining bees off. Or air bounce, in other words, bring it up and snap it down so that most of the bees fall off and then finish it up. I mean, they don't like a brush, they'll get very upset with the brush. The other next is a fume board, where we're using a chemical that's a repellent for bees. For clean the bees out of our supers, we'll put this on. It works best with vaporization of chemicals. So we do it on a sunny day, shiny surface. We simply drive the bees on down. And often what we'll do is we'll drive them out of the first box and then take that box off and put this fume board here, drive them out of the second bottle and the third. And these chemicals are very smelly for us, but don't leave residue. And at Green Acres last year, here we are harvesting. We were doing with a bee blower, which is not much more than a leaf vac. Okay, and finally, next, the bee escape. And this works well, in cooler weather, and so we would put this down below the supers of the box. It's a one-way escape. The bees can go down through the tines, but then can't come back into the soup. And this works well if the nights are cool. In other words, there's a reason why the bees want to leave the super getting colder and colder at night, go back down where the rest of the warmth is, where the rest of the bees are. On these very warm, hot nights, this doesn't work it well. There's not much reason to leave a super to go down to a hotter hive down below. So depending on technique. Extracting honey, not much I want to say, of course, on that is this is what your own home operation would look like: an extractor, a box for capping, for example, a tank to do the uncapping. Okay, a few other instruments. I mean, you're looking at a few bucks, of course. There, the extracting for liquid honey is all the extractors have the very same principle. You're using centrifugal motion. You have to remove the capping and then spin the comb, and that's basically centrifugal motion. There are some very cheap models, some more expensive models, a few frames, a large number of frames. There's even a homemade frame that by bouncing the stick like up and down like a polo stick, you keep the centrifugal motion going against the frames. Okay. We figure the very first extractor was someone taking it and putting it in a bucket and then slinging it around their head. The only problem was then you had to go around to all four walls to remove the honey. So what are the others? The liquid honey then needs that equipment. There's really no easy shortcut. You can destruct harvest. So you can take the honey itself, the comb, cut the comb and let it drain. But if you're going to do that, then probably look for a market that is going to take the cut comb. This is you can make honey that's in sections, right? What's called comb honey, or more commonly cut comb honey. The only thing what you'll want to look for there is a section that has pretty much uniform capping. You let it drain so it doesn't drain into the container. And you just find a container that fits, or you just simply wrap it with cellophane. Creamed honey, it's a process, and you have to follow all the steps. You have to filter the honey first. You have to heat it to get it through a filter. And then you add about 10 to 15% already creamed honey of the consistency that you want. You mix it in without mixing in air bubbles, and then stick it at 50 to 57 degrees for a week. And you'll sometimes get air bubbles that come up. You can see there's a little bit of an interface up here. Okay. Chunk honey is adding a chunk of honey, those pieces that you don't know what to do with, but then putting them in a wide mouth jar and putting liquid honey around it. So that's a good alternative rather than mashing and cutting is you're going to have those extra pieces and put the two together. And then of course products, foods with honey, shampoos, soaps, etc. medicines. That's a honey dressing. Next.
What's the advantage of cream?
It's the consistency of butter. You put a knife in it and it spreads on toast and it's easier.
Well, it won't run off, so it's.
It doesn't run off so easily. Yeah. It's a major way it's marketed in the northern states, simply because most honeys will want to cream by themselves or crystallize. And when the honey does that, often the crystals are not nice, flat, uniform. And so when you control the process, you get something the consistency of butter, okay, not of a grainy, sandy consistency. Infused honey, okay, looking for a way to value add your honey, put some CBD in it. Yeah. Honey sales, anything from simple carts to big shows, products. Okay, again, if you're going to hit an audience, make more than one product with your honey. You'll get more sales. Products at fairs and outside like this, you see there's several different size containers. Now, often then something for the kids, something sort of aspect for kids. You can buy the honey straws. We can't make them easily. Now, for a very small amount, and you're the return, you can get honey straws for under 5 cents a piece if you order in bulk. And then sell them for like 25 cents a piece for return, and that'll get the younger customers. Next.
Do you need a machine to make those?
You
honey
do, the guy that invented the machine is in Salem, Oregon, he's on version, 10.0 or something like that. So, there's not gonna be any easy way to do it. The other thing to do is to make your own candies. If you make a honey centered hard candy, just a sugar base around the outside, you can accomplish, get the same thing. And again, for pennies, you're making these and you can actually sell them again, not at 25 cents, but you can find a set bag for $1. You can get value added. You could put with chocolate. The last one to show, so here's me buying honey in a Bolivian market. And so here's his honey sales table. Back of his bicycle, back of his bicycle, Susie. And he was selling honey about a quarter of the price of what honey would normally sell in the country. So I asked him about his source. And yeah, he had a bee. he was selling nice. That's honey.
Right, sir.
Of course, the concept of honeymoon is all about honey. This was Jessica and Nicholas's wedding. That's really value added. Brides spend a lot of money on their weddings. You get hooked into some of this. Good job. Next. I think the last one. Oh, I did say you want something on judging honey. So judging honey, we exaggerate. We exaggerate what the consumer should be looking for. So what we're going to be looking for is the moisture content. We'd like the range to be between 15 and 18. Below 15, they may take points off, and if it's above 18, they take points off. And there'll be a judging standard, and whenever you enter in a fair, the next one coming up is Washington County. Washington County is accepting entries on this Saturday afternoon. And then the fair actually opens a week later. Of course, Oregon State Fair, and you have to go on their Oregon State website to find it and read the instructions. If it says 3 jars, you have to have 3 jars, equal jars, because they're going to compare between the 3 jars. This was also being set, so they were judging 1 jar here, and then it was being set up for tasting later on. So these little cups for people to taste later on. So here, this was in Arkansas, they're judging. And what we're going to do is we're going to exaggerate. The biggest thing that beekeepers can control is air bubbles, foam or air bubbles, and dirt. Dirt in the container, ants that get in afterwards, hairs. If you fill up your jar to let the air bubbles come to the surface, then sitting in your room, the dust from your room will settle on. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at the interface of the honey. So I'm going to look this way, bounce light off into my eyes, and I'll quickly see that he left it out 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours. I can judge it that quickly. How long you've got the jar out, but how much is floating there. You don't see it's floating on the top. We also look for crystallization. That's a measure of most shows say you got this season's honey. And if there's a crystallized honey in the show, it usually means that beekeepers had that more than just the last couple of months of the show. And so those are things to take. For honey in the comb, we're looking for evenness of the cut, all the cells being filled with honey, and then you let it drain over a screen so that when you put it in the container, give it to customers, sell to customers, or put it in the show, you don't have the liquid that's draining down and making the honey wet on the bottom. All you do is let that drain ahead of time. So we're exaggerating. We're exaggerating what your customers look for. The things that you don't have control over, honey flavor, okay, honey color, we're not judging that. Okay, we separate honey classes by color, but we're not judging them within the class. This is lighter than this other one, so it gets more points. Not at all. Fits in that category, lighter, amber, or darker. Sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's 5 divisions. And then the way to game honey judging, honey contest is not just think your extracted honey jars, but all the other things that we can make with honey, all right? And so most shows will have a category for best in show, and that will be the best one. And then there's another one, a grand prize, with how many points you gather. So if you have some comb honey, and if the show allows that filled frame with honey is a factor, what's that mean? Creamed honey, even though if it's terrible, no one else is going to enter cream honey, you're gonna get points. So you're going to gather points, not because you have the very best honey that you could possibly make in your liquid honey, but that you gathered all those points. And it's also a good idea with that and with multiple extractions to kind of separate your colors. So early season, we have the lighter honeys, right? If you're where there's a lot of basswood trees, a very light water white honey, with the blackberry, and an amber honey. Some of our sunflowers and some of the chestnut, some of the others give you a darker honey. And again, if you're selling honey, you have the 3 colors. You might get customers to buy one of each color, but also in a show, you can enter those will then be separated by color classes, and then you can accumulate more first places or second places or third places. Okay. The best in show is usually the hardest thing to enter the show to get good points is honey and comb. And so when I'm doing a show, I'll often get the honey and comb. How well did they do? The whole frame or those pieces of cut comb? Okay. We know, of course, other uses for honey as a vehicle. Honey helps the medicine go down. Okay, and of course, as a medicine, think of digestive tract. Think of eye, ear, nose, throat. In terms of any of the elements that we have related to those, it is used regularly for colon cancer and digestive tract cancers, and of course, as a wound dressing. We cannot go ahead and sell our medicine, our honey as a medicine, but you will have clients that will come up and are buying it, not because they're going to put it on toast or tea, but because they are. So that's, so you're well aware of that. I just did one of the Beekeeping Today podcast this week, and my topic was medicine, was honey, and I talked about human medicines. Yeah.
Well, you can go back to that. What is, processing of cigarette?
Yeah, cigarettes and pipes, cigars are all processed, tobacco is all processed.
Really?
Yeah, all of them, yeah.
Okay, what's the golf ball then?
At one time, there were liquid centers in golf balls.
Yeah, there were.
No longer.
There's also a new
And
strain.
one time we used it as a bottling fluid. Yeah, it's still a very good one. Did not do it. And of course, we know countering the effects of alcohol. So the morning after drink, if it's honey or that evening or before you go out and get sloshed, start with honey. Have your evening drink too. Of course, there's ingredients. Yeah.
So I harvested honey this spring. That was maple and black locust.
Probably, yes.
And
Yes, we had both, a lot of both this year for some reason.
yeah, about a month ago, it turned solid in the jars. So it was all packed. That's not the issue. But it's creamy. It's like creamed honey. It's not big crystals.
It's not big crystals, not sandy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like creamed honey, and I've got 6 quarts of it, and they're all like that.
Yeah, and the nice thing with that type of crystallization is it doesn't take much warming of the jar to get it back to the liquid form. It's not solid, so solidly crystallized that it doesn't go back. I wish I knew what that was was doing that, because our understanding of beef leaf maple does not. It's higher in fructose. It's why it's so sweet, so fruity. And the the locust is a terrible honey, but it's sweet. It's very fruity. It really leaves a very sweet taste in your mouth. But again, that's not one that is known to crystallize very rapidly. So I'm not sure what it is that we're getting that's adding that. Certainly honeys like dandelion will crystallize very quickly. You know, rape will as well. Some are just known to crystallize rapidly, but neither of those two, which is probably what you got a lot of, don't crystallize that quickly. Normally don't crystallize that rapidly. Horse chestnut, which comes afterwards a little bit. Willows and maples are mostly pollen. There's very little nectar that they get from other than big leaf maple. The gorse, of course, it will crystallize pretty quickly, but that's a little bit later than probably when you did that harvest. Yeah, I wish I knew what was doing that. I don't know. What
It's
it is.
good.
Any questions coming in?
Blooming maples this year.
Cherries are in bloom
And
at
they
the same time.
Way different.
They're usually
I wonder
different.
if cherry got in there.
And the cherries also like big leaf maple are front of the mouth flavorings and don't, you know, unlike let's say a clover that catches you at the back, meadow foam that catches you at the back of the mouth. They're the front of the mouth, and again, they're supposed to be higher in the fruit sugars, rather than the glucose. Grape sugar.
I had dandelions blooming with the big leaf maple this year.
We did. They were on there a lot. There's an awful lot that is available early in the spring. It really is.
So what's available now? Because it looks like the berries, blackbird.
Pretty much the blackberries are finally gone. And what we've had a fantastic nectar flow season for a lot of things, and it's sort of winding down now. So there's the Chinese import trees. They're in bloom.
The lindens in my neighborhood.
Are there lindens? Okay.
yeah. And there's
Where they
lindens
occur,
in-
that's a good source.
Laurelhurst too.
Laurelhurst, yeah. Along the river, there's some lindens out near University of Portland. There's a bunch of lindens. Tree of Heaven. And then there's a lot of planted stuff that's available. Anyone that has put in Phacelia, that's now in bloom.
Are we?
Mm,
I've got a ton of them.
yeah. Where are we already? What is it? It's July.
Yes.
You know, everything was early this year.
Yeah.
Things just kind of got jumbled together.
We've got some
Uh,
oranges. blooming.
Down in Tigard area, borage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Brazilian borage.
Mint, oregano.
There's a lot of clovers now. You know, people that are still watering their plants in their lawns. There's a lot of that in bloom. There's euonymus now in bloom. Still some of the the native rosaceae, the roses and that whole plant group. There's still almost any month of the year, there's a rosaceae in bloom. Now, the selected roses, of course, you can have many.
And the street mints.
And there's a lot of the mints that are in bloom. And a lot of the herbs from herb gardens and things, whatever they have. Bee balm,
Fine.
salvia, thyme. You know, maybe that's what got in early on where you are down there, Susie. I'm not sure what would be so getting into that, because locust and little leaf just are not known to be quick crystallizers. Anything from anyone else?
Nope, nothing
Nope.
from the.
Okay, well, we can wrap it up. Be
Thank you.
yourself. Okay, thank you.
Nothing.